Hiya, this is Kitten Features, and you're listening to Show X Live with Ken in the student accommodation all the way in Scotland. Wait, that was years ago. You're listening to Show X Live with your favorite Scotsman Ken, currently residing in the US of A, and Wayne, mostly from Colorado, but spending way too much time in the Howling Abyss instead of Summoner's Rift. Enjoy the show!
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Show X. You're listening and viewing us live today at 2 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. GMT on this Sunday, the 7th of June, 2020. Everyone, this week we're going to have a little bit of a different show. Hopefully you've all looked at what we were mentioning in the comments leading up to today, as we wanted to have take a moment to talk about things that have been going on in the world in the past couple weeks. To have this discussion, we're joined as always by Ken, but also by good friend of the show, Todd, our friend Octale from back in the Octale and Hordak days. Welcome, Todd. Good to have you with us today.
Hi, thanks for having me. Excited to be here. Always fun to hang out with you guys for a couple hours and talk the talk, as they say.
So, for people who want to participate with us today, please feel free to share us wide and loud on all the media so we can get people to jump in, and we'd like to hear and see your opinions on this. We are going to make this available as a call-in show. If you'd like to join us in the conversation, feel free to message us on Skype at VTW Shows. That's VTWSHOWS, and we will work to bring you onto the call. We are going to try to limit anyone who does join us to no more than maybe 5 minutes, just to kind of have a brief say on what's going on as we continue to have the discussion for the 2 hours of today's show. So, much as the title implies, what this is going to kick off with is us bringing up what's been going on, primarily kicked off here in the United States, and how that's been observed worldwide, and some of the things we're seeing coming out from it. I do not expect this to be a lightweight show. I understand if this isn't a subject a lot of people are ready to listen to or discuss, but I do invite you to participate. I invite you to spend some time and listen to the discussion, because I think this is something that is very important, especially in my own personal life, how I've seen the interaction from friends of mine, from people I follow on social media, and in general, the response from the greater media and things like that for what's going on in the world today. So, to set the background, just to catch everybody up, I am sure you have heard to some level what has happened, but reading from the Wikipedia article, kind of talking about it in general, this harkens back to on May 25th, where George Floyd, a 46-year-old black man, died in Minneapolis, Minnesota, after police officer Derek Chauvin knelt on his neck for almost 9 minutes while Floyd was handcuffed and lying down face first on the street. 2 other officers further restrained Floyd, and a 4th prevented onlookers from intervening. Floyd, who had been arrested on suspicion of using a counterfeit bill, begged for his life, repeatedly telling officers, quote, "I can't breathe." During the final 3 minutes, Floyd was motionless and had no pulse. The officers ignored onlookers' pleas that they release Floyd, and Chauvin's knee remained on Floyd's neck even as emergency medical technicians attempted to treat him. Police initially claimed that Floyd had resisted arrest, but after security cam footage and videos made by witnesses circulated widely, all 4 officers were fired. 2 autopsies later found Floyd's death to be a homicide. Chauvin was charged with initially 3rd-degree murder, has since been upgraded to 2nd-degree murder, including 3rd-degree murder and 2nd-degree manslaughter. The other 3 officers were not initially charged, but in sense have been charged with aiding and abetting 2nd-degree murder. The FBI and Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension are both investigating the incident. So that was what occurred that essentially sparked things. I, in this show, am not planning on sharing any of the videos. We may link or things like that, but I have no desire to put them up on screen. I partially because that may be a bit challenging for people to watch themselves, but I do believe if you're trying to better understand and have not yourself experienced or seen those kind of things that have been coming through lately, give yourself whatever you need to be ready for it. But I think it is important that you do watch some of those videos to understand
Oh yeah.
a lot of the response of what you're seeing across the US and the world. Because there's a piece where that is, I think, very relevant and important to understand. So those are the main pieces I want to put out. I also want to caveat from the get-go that I myself am no expert when it comes into essentially, I'm not an expert on these issues as a whole. I can speak from my own personal background and the things that I have experienced and what I've been witnessing and seeing myself and my thoughts on it, as well as we're invited both for Ken and Todd to share yours. As well as this is where we absolutely advocate for you guys in the chat to respond, let us know your feelings and thoughts, as well as if you want to call into the show, let us know at VTW shows on Skype. All right, so that's framing things. I kind of want to let each of you start off with some of your own thoughts. Ken, I'll start with you and just generally what you've been seeing and what's your first response to like just the fact that this happened. Part of the reason I feel like this show will be interesting is, I'm an American. I have grown up and lived my entire life in the U.S. I am of a mixed background where I am both black and white. And so I have seen my own experiences growing up. Ken is from Scotland, pretty much born and raised, and is now living in the United States and has that perspective of seeing as an external person coming in and from his own background to what he's seeing personally. Todd, born and raised in the United States, kind of up from the similar area to where Ken is now, but now lives abroad in Norway and can hopefully give some perspective of what the rest of the world is seeing today. So that's actually why I really am excited for the panel or the people we've brought together today. So Ken, to you, I know you have opinions.
Oh, too many. Thank you very much. And I think we should start off by saying that the people we should be listening to first and foremost are those who are going through similar experiences. African Americans who have, experienced the violence of the police, the racism that exists in the United States today, and has for forever, pretty much. They're the people we should be listening to first. And so, I'm giving my opinions as a white guy, and I always feel like, I'm allowed to share my opinion. There's nothing wrong with that, of course. But, first and foremost, if you have the choice of who to listen to the people who have experienced it first, just like with anything, right? They're the people you should listen to first. So before we delve in super deep, we talked about second degree and third degree murder earlier. I want to define those, because I think we hear these terms a lot, but a lot of people don't know specifically what that means in terms of law. So I got this from a news article from voanews.com, and they define it that according to Minnesota statute, second degree murder is whoever causes the death of a human being without intent to effect the death of any person while committing or attempting to commit a felony offense other than criminal sexual conduct of the first or second degree. So in other words, they were intentionally trying to assault the person, but not necessarily trying to kill them. That's what second degree murder effectively means in Minnesota. Someone found guilty of second degree murder can face a prison sentence of no more than 40 years. Third degree murder is, according to Minnesota statute, whoever causes the death of a person by perpetrating an act eminently dangerous to others and evincing a depraved mind without regard for human life. So the main difference there is that second degree murder, there's an intent of violence. Third degree is there might not be an intent of massive grievous bodily harm, but it was there anyway. So it's about the intent behind the actions. First degree murder, of course, is intended. Also third degree murder, somebody who is found guilty of this faces a prison sentence of no more than 25 years. No more than $40,000 or both. So there's a fair bit of difference there. There's a 15-year difference in the maximum sentence, and there's also a fine attached to the third degree murder when there isn't to the second degree murder in Minnesota. So that's worth mentioning, because I think we need to understand why being upgraded to second degree murder is quite a big deal. Being charged for something that you can get half your life away instead of a quarter or a third is kind of a big deal. So what I've seen so far, and my opinions on the whole matter, I come from a background in Britain where police are generally seen as a welcome sight. If you see police, you generally feel safe. You can ask them for help, for directions. If you have any issues and you call the police, you don't generally feel endangered. I should also mention that I'm not just from Britain, I'm from Scotland. And in Scotland, it's a much larger white population than other parts in the UK, especially where I lived. So, you know, it is, to be fair, a very white background, not very mixed. So I don't know if that's the case for, I'm not going to say African Americans, because that's an incorrect term for people who have nothing to do with America but are black, right? So black people in Scotland will have different experiences. So I'm not trying to speak for them. My experience is that the police are very friendly. I think most people would agree with this in Scotland in general. There are, of course, exceptions, but they're very well trained, they're well paid, and I believe they're, you know, if there's any issues, they tend to get called up for it, as far as I'm aware. My only experience with the police directly, you guys might recall last year, I was called out to a neighbor's house because I heard lots of loud noises, and there was a man beating the living life out of his wife. And I pulled the guy off of her, and my wife called the police, and the police came in and you know, took over. And my experience with them was that, you know, I told them where to go, and even though I was a large, bald white guy who probably looks kind of intimidating, and they might have thought I was a suspect, they instantly, just for some reason, just assumed that I was not the problem here, and they followed me for where to go, and I directed them, and they trusted me. I feel like if that sort of incident happened in the US, even though I'm white, I might have been fined because of that reason. But I also think I would have been under suspicion just because I was near the crime and clearly trying to, you know, interfere with police in some respect. So my experience with police is generally that they've been very friendly, and I have no problem with them in the UK. In the US, I got pulled over once by police, and I was terrified. You know, you hear all these stories about getting pulled over by police and in the US and how it can escalate. But, you know, part of my mind told me during that, well, it's not going to be that bad because as far as they're concerned, you're the right color, right? Not saying that all police are corrupt, and not saying that all police are bad. In fact, I want to specifically point out an acronym that I've seen getting thrown around, which is
ACAB?
ACAB, yeah.
Yep.
And it stands for All Cops Are Bastards. Is that right?
That is how I have seen it defined.
Okay, and I've seen a similar going around saying all cops must die, and I think that's ridiculous. I as horrible as all that's going on and as corrupt as I truly do believe the U.S. police are, I don't think every single one of them deserve to die. I think that's and I've seen people trying to say we should, you know, disassemble the police and they should be revoked entirely and not exist. That doesn't make sense. We can't live in anarchy. We do need police. There needs to be reform. But I think getting rid of the entire concept would be ridiculous, and I think there'd be way more problems than there currently are. Not saying that there aren't problems, and I do think the police are very corrupt. I just think there needs to be reform rather than entire destruction of the police in existence. So that's generally my views. I think that me and my wife have been putting up banners on our windows because of the pandemic that's currently going on. We're of the opinion that being outside and protesting, while even though this is a very important thing, it is dangerous inherently. Regardless of what your beliefs are, there's a pandemic going on, and I think that it will kill more people than can possibly be killed in wars. So I think we'd be really careful with that. So I recommend if you are interested in protesting, do so where you can. And where you feel safe doing so. I personally don't feel safe going out. I don't feel it's safe for others for me to go out. So I am protesting we have banners all over our windows that are telling people where to donate to help local organizations for BLM and the likes. We've been posting on Twitter, on Facebook. We've been talking with family and friends. Because a lot of my friends in Britain don't necessarily understand what it's like over here. They think it's kind of overblown in some respects. And I try to explain that, in this past week, we've seen people walk past our house with rifles, with AR-15s and stuff, because they're going on the way to protest and for some reason need guns to do this. So that's a brief overview of my thoughts. I'm happy to delve into it more.
Well, we'll get into some of the specific discussion points back and forth, especially one of my goals with the show at the end is to provide some course of action type things. I don't think it's appropriate to just have a conversation that goes cyclic and allows people just to express emotion. I would like to give people's avenues that they can use to do something at the end of the discussion. So thank you, Ken. Todd, reaching out to you because you have been witnessing this from outside, but you lived here, grew up here, and I'm sure have had your own personal experiences with just the ideas and feelings of police action in the United States, let alone some of the potential reasons you could see for what did occur in that specific case, and perhaps seeing even what leads us into the greater response that's happened throughout the United States and the world. So turn to you, Todd, to kind of give us some fill in on what you've experienced so far on your side.
So much to unpack.
Yeah.
Right.
And that is the thing. I doubt we'll even touch
in this,
everything.
And stuck is probably the wrong word, but we find ourselves in this conflux moment in time where everybody's been trapped in their house since late winter.
Oh yeah.
And now all of a sudden, not only there's a not only is there a reason to go outside, but it's one of the most important reasons that a person could want or need to go outside, right? Like the ability to peacefully assemble and have your voice heard, like the cornerstone.
It's one of those things that here in the United States, I always press forth as being, when you talk about constitutionalists and rights and things like that, it's the number one First Amendment issue. It's all about assembly and things like that. Todd, we lost you on the audio there for a second. I don't know if you're still there. It was just mid-sentence where it went quiet on you.
I'm back.
Okay,
maybe.
Cool. Yes.
Yeah, we hear you. Yep.
Okay.
It's just in that moment we were building up to the point.
I'm about ready to drop. I'm about ready to drop something profound, and the internet says no.
And those powers that listen in are like, nope, we can't have that truth out there.
Yeah, it's like the undercover CIA.
Exactly. No, please continue. Yes.
Stopping me. So the right to peacefully assemble is the first freedom that was given to everybody, right? When our country was formed.
Yes.
So I guess my hope is that out of tragedy we have this sort of hopeful feeling of real change, of large change, and I don't mean in terms of the scope of the change, but the breadth of the change. Like we may be able to change a lot of things all at once, is my hope.
Okay.
Whereas trying to change one microscopic thing by a lot would be the sort of opposite of what I'm talking about. To that end, Wayne, I have to say thank you for sharing the Van Jones video.
Okay.
Because I would not have looked at it had it come across my YouTube naturally. I mean, I don't particularly care for Conan O'Brien as a presenter, and I have a very bad first impression of Van Jones. So
isn't it an interesting state? Yeah.
I saw that and I was like, oh God. But because you had shared it, like it was like, all right, like Wayne's, like I know Wayne. Of all the people who's gonna share this thing out to the public, like it definitely got vetted by somebody I trust. So, and I watched it, and he was much more measured than I thought he was going to be. I mean, this was the guy who was crying on CNN's air 4 years ago.
Yep.
Right at the end of the election coverage on CNN. The dude was in tears.
Yes.
And it was just like, okay, I can't imagine what kind of hysterics this is gonna be. But no, it was really cool. It was measured. There's a lot of common sense in there. Cornel West is dropping tons of common sense. Like, I listened to his bit on CNN.
Yep.
Right, and it made me go, you know what? I have to go back to, he was on Rogan. Like, I have to go back and figure out, you know, and watch the whole Cornel West episode of Rogan now, because like this guy's got it too. I can't imagine what it would be like to assume you're going to be on the wrong side of an authority or an investigative body, right? And I only have really one experience with this. Like, I may walk right up to the line but never ever cross the line kind of guy.
Okay.
Like, I know what the rules are and I don't violate them because they're the rules.
Yes.
But and before I start the story, please don't misunderstand. This is not 1/10,000th of 1% like comparable to anything that like.
Still,
Wayne
this is
or-
your experience. This is your experience.
Yeah. So, when I was getting my security clearance re-upped for the last time, it was 2013, 14.
Okay.
And I knew that I was moving to Norway eventually because Miriam and I were married, and like we were just waiting for the immigration stuff to come in. And so I filled out all the paperwork and didn't, you know, fill in any of Mog's family because they don't qualify as close and continuing contact.
Yes.
Right, which is standard for reporting them. Like, I see them 2 weeks every 2 years.
Sure.
Up to that point. That was the extent of my contact. And so I had an investigator come to my workplace and was interviewed for something like 5 hours.
Huh. Yep.
Over 2 sessions, talking about, you know, if you're married and you move to Norway and you have kids and your wife dies, what are you gonna do?
Interesting. Wow.
Like, I don't know. She's 10 years younger than me. Like, I'm gonna die first. But let's, for argument's sake, say she walks in front of a bus. I don't know. I haven't even, like, can I live with her for more than a week
Yeah.
before we figure out what I'm going to do with my metaphorical kids when my wife dies? And then the immediate follow-up, like without missing a beat, was like, well, what are you gonna do if you get divorced? Like, I don't know.
Oh,
And it
let me just check my plans I have meticulously made just in case
Yeah.
I get divorced. You know.
Like, I've had the next 50 years mapped out, and you know, day 1,365 after the divorce,
Yeah.
I'm gonna give up and move back to America. Like, and again, just please don't misunderstand. My experience and other experiences are just not night and day. But
Yep.
I felt horrible having 10 years of my social media presence laid out in front of me and being asked to explain why I was angry that AT&T was going to be allowed to merge with T-Mobile.
Yep.
Right? And I said something that was unfortunate at the time, but in 2010, I didn't think I was ever going to be in a closed area again. Like, I thought I was losing my clearance rather than re-upping it. So it's like, well, whatever. You know, fortune favors the bold. Blah. And so the long story short, it was a very combative interview process. And I just remember how horrible I felt and how, like, de facto guilty I felt.
Being
Even
under
though
that
you
kind of
hadn't really done anything wrong, you made a completely
done
fine
anything
tweet.
wrong.
But just
I
having
know.
that kind of scrutiny directed at you.
I can't imagine what it's like for that to be the default every day. That would be exhausting. Like I can't. I have no idea. It would require mental and emotional strength that I'm not equipped for at all in any way.
Now, I appreciate that. I appreciate you expressing it that way because I think that's something I have been witnessing from a lot of my friends and things like that and people around me. Because I do want to get into other aspects of things in the later, and just to follow that up, Todd, as we then redirect into more specifics on this, what happened here, I'll share some of my experience just real briefly, because I think that ties in really well. Where, like I said, I'm of mixed background. I have a black father and a white mother. And to put a little bit of context, because a lot of people today don't see that as any big issue, when my parents got married, there were parts of my family who did not attend the wedding because they did not approve of a black and white woman, or a black man and a white woman being married. So that's one generation separation, right? That's my family who are still my family that were making those decisions coming out of the 60s and such. And at the same time, I will give all the props in the world to my parents and my family for creating an environment that growing up, I never felt. And I feel very advantaged that I had a very stable household and kind of things. And because I grew up in a military family, I had a bit of a bubble in many cases from experiencing what was happening outside of base. But even with that, I've had my moments. I remember back in living in Nebraska after we were out of the military, and my first experience that I validated as being maybe racially charged, even though it wasn't with an authority system, but was when my younger brother, Earthweaver, was actually out shopping for his first set of multi-sided dice to use in role-playing, and we went to the local hobby store for that. And when we went in, the proprietors at the hobby store followed us and watched us every aisle we were in. And when we went to check out, he accused my younger brother of having pocketed a set of dice, even though what we had done is looked at the individual ones and then found the full sleeve that has like one of each that's cheaper. And for him being young and using his allowance, that being the better deal. And so, cool, pick that set. And I remember because I'd watched this guy follow us from a distance, aisle to aisle, always watching us. And in checkout, him accusing my brother of doing this. And me basically, for the first time, losing it to think of saying, like, why the heck did you accuse us of anyone in the store? And because I could look around and see the demographic around me. And we were basically representing the only people with any melatonin in our skin, right? More recently, and that was like a light awareness where it's just like, what the heck? I've said this story to multiple friends of mine. I got pulled over coming home one day when I was driving in my old 93 Ranger, my pickup, all of just over the hill from my home, from my neighborhood. And I live in a fairly affluent area within Denver, in the eastern end of Aurora. And I got pulled over at night on my way home. And as the police officer approached and talked to me, apparently his reason for pulling me over was that I had little accent lights on my license plate that had kicked on. I thought were broken, but had worked. So he pulled me over for that. But when all of that was fine for the most part, except that when he asked for my identification, I gave him my license. As I pulled it out of my wallet, behind it, I had my old college ID when I went to Colorado Tech. And this is Wayne without shaved head and things like this. And he looked at and saw another ID, and his comment out of his mouth was, "What's that?" I was like, I was confused. I don't know what. He's like, "Is that your Mexican ID?" And I was taken aback, like, what the heck's that? And I was like, this is my college ID. What are you talking about? And as soon as he realized the mistake he had made, he tried desperately to end the interaction and didn't give me his badge, his card, any of the things you're supposed to do as a police officer to identify your contact. He just wanted to get out of there because he had not necessarily towards a black person, but had still racially profiled me because I was in a old pickup truck, which admittedly you may stereotype to those people here of a Hispanic background who often get those trucks and they use it in their work and things like that and such. So I'd run into that. I'd run into situations where I was pulled over
even
often.
If you were Mexican.
Again, Ken, I'm just saying, these are examples. These are examples of things that I believe were racially charged. There was a time when I was pulled over due to my ex-wife's car having its registration a month out of date, and got pulled over as part of a touch point. Police officers do that legitimately to try to run to see if there's any warrants and things like that. But in that occasion, I had my ex-wife in the passenger seat and her parents in the back seat as we were coming back from dinner, getting pulled over in Aurora and having one of the more aggressive interactions with a police officer where they did the spotlight on the car so I couldn't see back. And when they came up, we're all dressed very nice from a nice dinner. The hand on gun, walking up to the car, directing me how to respond. And I'm a little baffled, like, why would I have been pulled over? I'm not speeding. I have my in-laws in the car. What would I possibly do? But just in a certain aggressive level until they got the identification and finished that encounter, that got me really heart rate running. That was like the first occasion where I was in a situation where I was a little fearful of how I was going to respond to ensure I didn't give the police officer any reason to escalate things. And how that left me like, holy cow. Those have been my own personal interactions. Otherwise, I've been mostly good. But at the same time, and we'll get into the specifics because, again, it's police interaction, what's starting this conversation. I have built a sense of concern now, and I think even Ken, it's interesting to hear your feeling of that and how you guys each might have a general feeling. And I appreciate, Todd, very much you saying under that scrutiny how much effort and energy that took from you and how you can't imagine what it must be like to have that be the default. I genuinely, more than often than not, feel secure and comfortable. But when I am downtown, when I'm in areas that I'm not as comfortable with, and in general, I will tell you my thought is I don't want to have any interaction with a police officer because I feel like that just opens up the door for a misunderstanding. Yep. But in the back of my head, I have all these concerns that even if I do everything I believe is correct, let alone what I know to be true legally and what I can and cannot do in a situation when I believe as a citizen of this United States and with my my constitutional rights about inappropriate search, seizure, and things like that, what I should be able to expect in any interaction with law enforcement. If I've done nothing wrong, I don't believe I should expect or that there should be any reason for me to be accosted in any way, like hands put on me. I have a fear that I might get thrown to the ground because a police officer feels like that is the safest thing for him in that situation. And I am concerned with what my natural reaction might be because I've seen it done to so many people now in so many videos, and it's never pleasant. It's never someone just saying, you know, it's one thing if they give you the opportunity to get on the ground, but I've seen too many examples where the police officers feel they need to put you on the ground.
Throw you. Mm-hmm.
And it's usually violent. People getting their heads smashed against cars, the ground, things like that. And it's been exasperated with the more videos I see come out that I genuinely have a sense of unease about any interactions with police officers. And I'm hoping for those people who don't have that or don't understand that or maybe think that's not that are, like you said, Todd, that you can't imagine what that's like every day. I invite our viewers to just think about that anytime you've had any of those kind of like, ooh, what am I, that wasn't a good experience. Think about when that's what you have to be concerned with every day when you walk out of your own house. When I run around my own neighborhood that I live in, a concern that somebody might, for whatever reason, point out or think that I was an issue, that even if it wasn't me, that someone else in the area may be identified. And I've heard a lot of stories like this where the description of someone they're looking for is so broad that just having a natural dark complexion could put me on the radar for someone that a police officer may want to interrogate or deal with or do something with. And me knowing that I haven't done anything wrong, I don't know how I'll react. And it concerns me.
Can I just highlight the part that you said earlier where you said that you were driving around your neighborhood, which is generally quite affluent, right?
Yeah.
And I know it's not very polite for us to discuss wealth in the show, and I'm not going into any extreme detail, but there's different types of privilege that exist, right? And I think an obvious one is class privilege, right? If you are generally speaking wealthier, you you can enjoy better health benefits, you can enjoy better grocery shopping, you can enjoy more luxuries in your life, and so on. That's a type of privilege, right? However you got it, be it through extreme effort, be it through hand-me-downs, whatever it may be, it's a type of privilege regardless, right? You can enjoy something that others can't. That's a privilege. And I think regardless of how rich you are or how affluent you are, it's interesting and kind of disgustingly poignant that the color of your skin will still affect you regardless of you being rich. You may think to yourself, oh, I've made it in some respects, or I'm better off than others, and I'm quite lucky in some respects. But your skin color still can pull you down because of the perception of other people and their racist viewpoints.
Yeah, there was a story in ESPN. It's probably 4 years old. Or more at this point, of an NFL player having an altercation at a Las Vegas casino. Right? And I mean, it's not like he was down on, it's not like he was at one of the pits, right? Okay. Out on the fringe. This was I think it was Caesars, but I don't remember that exact detail for a fact, but it was in that area. It was in the Mirage, Caesars, Bellagio, like right in that area, like the really
the new strip, yeah,
upscale. But even the upscale places on
the really nice resort
on
ones.
The strip.
Yep.
And and an NFL player, a guy that has, is in the 1% essentially, having an altercation with casino security that had to have been based on conduct related to his race.
And I find it fascinating because it's something that I learned from feminism, that this idea of intersectional feminism is where this concept came from for me. And it's the understanding that, in particular regard to women, that women, regardless of class or anything else, will generally speaking be looked down upon in certain respects because of their gender, no matter how well off they are in their class. And intersectional feminism is kind of the viewpoint that can, there's different perspectives in many different viewpoints. So for example, if you look at somebody based on whether they're fully able, if they're missing, say, a leg, or they're in a wheelchair, or they're ill, that's a type of privilege that's been removed from them, right? Same with if you're part of a lower social class, or if you are, I don't know, say a part of a less popular religion in a region, that can be a thing that can go against you in the eyes of society as well. And so this idea of intersectional feminism is really fascinating, because it can show that, that can really highlight the problems with each of these groupings within society, regardless of where they're from. We as humans, for some reason, thoroughly enjoy packing everybody into little groups. But the truth is that the groups are actually very complex. It's not just black and white, it's not just male and female, but there's also all these other things and perspectives that can be looked upon. I mean, if we think about this NFL player, imagine he was instead a janitor, right? I imagine that wouldn't be in the newspaper, would it? Right? And that's a type of privilege that the fact that people were appalled by it. They wouldn't have been appalled if he was of a lower class, right? And that's kind of fascinating in itself.
Well, there's a thing, Ken, about that where you're saying, lead it back to specifically this police encounter and what it sparked, is that everyone seems to agree in pretty open terms that the specific instance with George Floyd being murdered in this case by police officers was wrong. That no matter what the offense was, and then this one being associated with the suspicion of using a counterfeit $20 bill, should have led to someone being killed on the spot, especially when all evidence shows he did not resist any of and complied with what they were asking. That leads to this multi-layer issue that I think initially speaks to the potential for people in a position of authority, specifically like police, and more loosely some of the things we're seeing with responses from the government at large, their sense of privilege or such like that. Earlier on, Earthweaver brought up the fact that one of the challenges today is that police officers have a certain level of protection in how they do their jobs. One of those is brought up as qualified immunity, which is essentially that they themselves as individuals are not liable for their actions. While yes, we may see police officers who will get, accused and convicted of doing things inappropriately, lose their jobs and things like that. Anything that's a penalty beyond that, like the ability to sue for financial or them even being responsible for the things that come with it, are separated and are actually, and this is a lot of people didn't realize, covered by our tax dollars. That their court costs and any payouts and things like that to victims from police misbehaving doesn't actually affect them individually and personally. They tend to still retain a lot of their retirements, their houses, all the things they've earned, even though they did something horrible that a normal citizen accused of would be liable through suits of wrongdoing for them to actually affect their livelihood beyond just that job, as well as additional pieces where right now there aren't really any institutionalized things around the U.S. that follow and track poor police behavior such that if they get fired from one precinct or a district or area, it keeps them from getting hired elsewhere and things like that. There's a lot of ways police officers can get away from stuff. And so that there's a little question as to whether or not that influences their behavior, knowing that they've got a certain shield around them, as well as what is often described as kind of that own built-in police desire to protect each other, and such that we as citizens don't really have a defined mechanism to hold the police officers accountable for their actions. They have mechanisms, things out there like internal affairs, but that's still part of their system, and it's closed off from the public. And so there's a lot of examples in our past, and this is something I want to bring out because we have the specific instance of this was wrong, but why this blew up to a much bigger issue is that this is systemic in a way. This is not the first occurrence. And just in the past month or so, we can point to multiple examples specifically of Black individuals being killed by police reaction or police interaction where no crime was committed, where truly innocent people were killed, let alone things where, due to that interaction with the police, led to someone being killed when the initial thing they were being stopped for, even if it was a crime, was such a minor crime that no offense ever associated with it would have led to a death penalty. Even when resisting arrest does not equal death penalty. Punching a cop does not equal a death penalty. So even those situations where people responded poorly does not equal a death penalty in any court of law. And so you have examples where, from a public perspective, my own perspective, you have police officers acting as judge, jury, and unfortunately in these cases executioner. And that bad enough, because now I will openly say, my opinion being, when a police officer kills someone without themselves being truly in threat of their life, they have committed murder. I personally don't believe there's another way to classify that through any exasperation of other things, because they are the ones with the means to disconnect it. But it shows that there is a real problem in the United States, specifically for what I can speak to, in overreaction of police and them being able to do it without essentially repercussion. Too many instances, police are either acquitted, and I can bring up lists of police that were acquitted, or they are given very minor penalties.
Oh, sure.
And so
or it's revoked later. Yeah.
Things like that. And so from a public perspective, it feels as though cops can do whatever they like with no repercussion, which you tie that in with this specific piece that was captured on video, as well as these pieces of multiple examples of it happening, even just in recent time, but reaching all the way back in the history of the United States. There is, from the Black community, from people of color, from other things, a bubbling up and continuous level of frustration.
Yeah.
That as you're hearing these things about how I may feel like I am always under the scrutiny, that I may always have the short end of the stick in initial encounter, it's based on all of this evidence of it happening to others. And I put that out there because I've unfortunately seen a lot of responses online of people. What I will get the most angry about on social media stuff is when I see people try to minimize both what happened specifically to George Floyd and try to say, I've seen memes and posts of things saying like, why is all of this other reaction, protests and things coming out of one person getting killed, which to me is disgusting as a response, let alone not understanding why things are continuing in this response with protests and stuff. Hey, because as we said at the top of the show, the police officers involved were charged with crimes. And that's why I clarified, even though I was reading it, that where they're at now, initially, only the one police officer, Chauvin, was charged, and originally was just with murder 3, which was the lowest of possible offenses with him. It's basically a totally accidental thing. And how I believe, and this might be a prelude to some of the discussion about the response, that if it were not for the very public reaction of large groups of people throughout the country and the world, I believe there would have been a very high likelihood we would not have seen more severe charges or additional charges or charges being brought up against the other officers. That
absolutely,
it felt, for me personally, when the first charge was given by the local attorney general, that it was given as a placation to the populace to say, look, we're doing something, but it not really having teeth. And everyone's saying, what about the other 3 officers there who let him die? And that concern.
Well, that's the thing as well. We've seen lots of other videos come out. We can talk about that separately because I think that's its own issue during the riots themselves. We've seen a lot of other videos of instances where there are cops who put their knee on the back of somebody, and it looks like it's going to be a repeat incident of George Floyd. And you see another cop like grab the original cop's thigh and move it to the side forcefully because they see there's people nearby with cameras. They see what's happening, and they're, at least wary enough to, at the very least protect themselves from scrutiny, which is, really not what they should be trying to do as their foremost thing. But, they should be doing that regardless. I think the cameras really are part of it. But we're seeing that this is actually a commonplace thing that is just not necessarily talked about the majority of the time.
Well,
and thankfully this one is standing out.
That specific thing about the cameras piece, one of the quotes that I've seen attributed to, and I'll have to verify it, but to, I believe, Will Smith, is one that's basically stated, racism and these reactions of police officers and things like this is nothing new. The only difference is that it's now being filmed.
I read the same
because
thing. Yeah,
one of the basic things is now that we have, all of us, these handy tricorders in our pocket that allow us to share information with the world immediately, we are finally capturing what has been happening to people all the time. And you'll hear it. And it's unfortunate because sometimes it only came out from, be it celebrities in some ways or comedians or things like that, who it was always part of the bit. But if you really paid attention to what they're talking about, they were showing how, this is real life for me every day. Yeah. And we have had to accept it to some level. And I've seen some recent posts, and I kind of wish I could reach out to my parents for this as a thought, because there were some experiences I didn't have. But someone recently shared on TikTok or something a list of their advice that their mother and father had left them, or I think their mother left them, every day for when they left the house. The ways to act and not act to avoid or to minimize the likelihood of them dying and increase the ability for them to come home safe every day when they left the house.
So speaking about the riots, and people have been saying to me, well, not to me, but I've been reading a lot of people posting online, particularly, white privileged people who don't really understand, who live in either other countries or in suburbs and really don't understand the plight of the average black person in the US. They've been saying, what's the point in these riots? Why are they causing so much destruction? The guy's getting charged with murder, so why are people upset? It's all being sorted. Like, should be a done deal now. And I want to actually say that Black Lives Matter as a movement, I don't think it's a cohesive movement in the sense that I don't think there's like a single leader, and I don't think there's a single organization. I think there's multiple, right?
It's a mentality.
It's hard to release. It's really hard to say. Yeah, absolutely. It's a general grassroots movement without a particular leader. There's leader figures, but there's no leaders.
As we transition, finish this thought. Sorry, Ken, go ahead. Finish about the protest, because I want to also throw over to Todd about their perspective from what he's been seeing.
Absolutely. So the reason I bring this up is that I think these people are saying, what's the point in all these riots? Why are people protesting? What's the purpose? And there's been this list that's been getting shared around, which I really like because it really defines it in a single. This is the path we need to take in the U.S. to stop the protests and to make people happy and to bring more equality. These are the 5 demands, the 5 major demands of the American people, is what it's called. 1, create an independent inspector body to investigate police misconduct. And this is independent, so not a government-based body, a civilian-based body that investigates police misconduct. 2, create a requirement for states to establish board certification with minimum education and training requirements for police. So you can't just join without any qualifications. Most countries, you require a degree. Like I know in Britain, you require at least a bachelor's degree to become a police officer. You need to be educated. 3, refocus police resources on training, de-escalation, and community building. They're not there to enforce the laws, they're there to support the communities, first of all. And that if you can actually help people so they don't feel the need to steal, if you can help the homeless, help the poor, and so on, they're not going to be as likely to commit crimes, and therefore these kind of confrontations are less likely to happen. 4, adopt the absolute necessity doctrine for lethal force. Like, you don't shoot somebody unless they are currently pointing a gun at you. There's no other time to ever have it, right? There's no reason to ever have lethal force unless it's getting pointed at you. And even then, a lot of countries in the world don't even do it then. In the UK, for example, the police don't have guns, right? Because there's no need for them there. And that obviously is kind of comparing apples and oranges in some ways, because there's a different culture with gun laws, etc. But still, regardless, absolute necessity doctrine for lethal force. And the 5th and final demand is codify into law the requirement for police to have positive control over the evidence chain of custody. So right now, the biggest problem, and I've seen lots of these videos getting shared around of, black guys down on the ground, police holding them down, and then a police guy puts his hand in his pocket, pulls out a little bag of cocaine and drops it next to him. And then he goes, "Oh, look what I found." I don't know if you've seen that video getting shared around.
There are too many examples of situations where essentially it looks as though police officers are planting evidence to increase the initial, crimes being levied against per an individual. And I won't add that to this discussion because I don't know if there are so many other pieces of just bad police behavior. I appreciate you brought that up, Ken, about some of the actions to go. Before we get into some more of those, because I have some other ones that absolutely are things we can do, because I don't want to leave this discussion without actions you can take forward. Todd, after all this happened and the initial police officers, it took a while before anything really was levied, but the outrage that started sparking with this video and what I saw as a build of pressure of, again, those examples of other police misconduct happening from the past several years showing up together, I felt like there was a surge of, energy within the United States of people saying that enough is enough. This is too much. I need to do more than just on social media say something's bad, to the point where people started openly protesting, organizing groups to get together around, in most cases, I've seen Capitol buildings at different states, cities, and such like that, to make their voice heard at how they felt this was an outrage. And where we've seen a lot of these things like Black Lives Matter and some of those agreed kind of over the top or very strong languages people have been doing, like the ACAB, FTP, and things like that people have put out. For you, Todd, external, but kind of getting your news coming through of what's been happening, what did you see kind of that build up from when things first happened to how people started responding?
The hardest part, honestly, was trying to figure out what was true.
I can see that. Yeah.
There's a lot of fake news out there.
Right? So, for example, when in the first, we'll call it 72 hours, it might have been less than that, but the first 72 hours in Minneapolis, there was a story that came out that got a lot of play that said that 80% of the people that had been arrested came from out of state. 100% fabrication, right?
Uh-huh.
And then that, touched off a set of conspiracy theories that the first cities in which there were large-scale demonstrations, the people were getting imported from out of state, and it was all, somebody went so far as to say it was all Antifa in Portland. right? Because Antifa's been operating in Portland with carte blanche essentially for almost 6 years now. And so that they were nationalizing, and it was the revolution had come, and or something like that. When, you know, the overwhelming majority of these protests have been peaceful. Yep. And, you know, they're even given the fact that the overwhelming majority of these protests have been peaceful, we're still seeing, you know, video evidence of what I'd call misconduct of the police in handling the protesters. And it's really hard in a snippet of video to put the video snippet in the greater context. But
sure, I have seen some videos getting shared around before the protests. Let's be specific. That had, you know, the police throwing down somebody and being really gruff with them. People were saying this is ridiculous, unfair violence. But in a different perspective, you saw that the guy had a gun, right? In that case, you sort of think to yourself, that's an acceptable time to use huge amounts of force on someone, right?
Sure,
that's acceptable. Sorry, please continue.
Exactly. No, but that's the thing. But then there have been other stories that Rogan talked about it. The Rising talked about it. The Hills sort of news and commentary show. They do like a morning daily news and commentary show. They talked about it, and one other person talked about it, that there are pallets of bricks being placed.
I saw this.
Yeah.
Near or around where protests are going to be happening. Which, I mean, it doesn't look like there are any construction sites around.
Yeah, so
right where these things are happening. So why would you have a need for a pallet of bricks in this place, right?
Yeah, let me jump on just some of the examples to go with that, because yeah, there have been, like you said, examples of where people, like you said, the bricks being seen and added as places. People are talking about other things showing up at sites that they don't remember bringing in. On top of that, there have been video evidence of people showing up and causing damage to a location and then leaving, who were not part of any of the protests and things like that. Because one of those things on top of the protest itself, as you're saying, Tom, because these protests have been swelling around the country, and I will give some anecdotal stuff on my own end, is unfortunately in a means to, I believe, diminish the message of the protest and why people are still very unhappy with it. There's also been, like I said, that diminishing effort. A lot of people have been doing things to try to point to any action that is construed as bad. So the things that have come out outside of the protest, the rioting and looting and things that have occurred in some cases, in some areas, not everywhere, in some places. And they're trying to focus on those things versus why are people so mad that that happens? And it's amazing how quickly they say, oh, I saw a quote specifically that people are sharing around as a way to easily minimize it, saying, you lost me at looting. That as soon as that happened, they now no longer care about anything that came before. And it's amazing to me how easily people are able to dismiss the systemic racism, the police brutality, and things like that are being highlighted by these protests and by people focusing because of some bad actors, and how they're just as quickly to say, I don't believe in anything you're doing with the looting and protesting. You're all bad, yet a couple bad cops don't equal all cops. And they try to do these weird equivalence things. And so I've seen examples of people actually what look to me to be inciting violence and action at what are peaceful protests to help cause it to transition into rioting and looting, because that makes it easier for people to ignore the message of what the protesters are
on the other side of that, I had a video come across one of my feeds of somebody who is hammering at a sidewalk trying to break off sections of concrete to give people something to throw. And the peaceful protesters apprehended that person and drug them over to the police.
And said, this guy here.
This guy, to essentially turn him in, but physically turn him in. to to get the people who are trying to incite violence out of the way so that these people can peacefully assemble.
Yeah, and that's the problem, is that the police will look at an assembly, and if one person is doing something illegal, they'll probably charge in, right? They have a reason to now, and so you got to be careful. Back to your point about fake news, Todd. Wayne, are you willing to share that last image that I sent you?
Yes.
So there's been a lot of fake news getting shared around, and before this goes up, I want to specifically mention that this is fake news, right? I saw this getting shared around today. It's a picture of the Lincoln Memorial, for those who are just listening in. Absolutely covered in hashtag BLM, justice, Black and Brown Lives Matter, and all this stuff. It's not true, right? They didn't go and just fake. It's been photoshopped.
This is an example of people.
That.
So, as I'll also say with it, it's people trying to hijack the message, because again, once they can try to put the people that are out there in a bad light, it's really easy for them to say, nope, I can't follow this. I no longer care that there's an issue there. And I will argue, and you guys feel free to chime in on your thoughts, that it's because there are so many people who this conversation is uncomfortable for, about inappropriate behavior from police, for systemic racism, things like that, that they will do anything they can to just, like, as soon as they're given something that allows them to dismiss, they'll do it. Mm-hmm. And then they don't care after that because they're happy because it's gone. It's like, nope, don't have to worry about it anymore. And that they do.
If you can't trust the authorities, who can you trust?
Yes.
Right? And the contract that we, the people, put in law enforcement is implicit. Like, you never get to sign that contract that says, I am going to trust you, police officers, to protect me and protect my property and protect, our liberties, right? And you don't get to sign that. You don't get to go, hey, wait a minute, but this guy's been disciplined 16 times in 4 years. Could we not have him protecting my property and my and my person and my liberties? Like, I'd prefer it if he was serving lattes or something else, where he's not going to be relied on to make a judgment call on something that's going to end up leading to catastrophe.
Yeah, no, it's such a crazy thing that we have that difference, that separation. I don't know what to call it.
Before I forget, Ken, you gave that list of demands.
Yeah.
And I want to say this now because I want to come back to it later. If that's it, if those 5 things are like the list of demands from all of this, the people who wrote that list of demands are aiming low.
Yeah, no, and that's why I said there are more things beyond that. That list is an example, and I want to get to some of the, like, what we do after, as we do after. So we've been joined by Kupchak / Happy Dude on now. And so, hey, how are you doing today, sir?
Well, I mean, personally, I'm doing okay, but mentally, I'm not all there.
Okay.
And one of the reasons is that I turned off Twitter for a couple of days. And I realized that there could be a way to erase all the negativity part of this and embrace the positive, like all the peaceful protesting and all the fundraising that's going on for different causes, and like I just can't get away from it. And like I think like as a as a person who can't fully wrap his head around all the negativity, I am embracing and loving the fact of all the positivity that's going on. I cannot wake up and check Twitter on my phone while getting a cup of coffee, because there is today, prime example. There was a tweet on the on the top of my timeline about a African American in a pair of handcuffs getting beaten on by a white police officer. Why? Why did that happen?
Yeah, once you're already in the handcuffs, why would you need to be, reduced to a point where you're unable to combat them? Clearly, you can't anyway. So what's the purpose of trying to beat them down?
Exactly. And with like when I came in earlier about how like Trump needs to step the hell up and actually say something, and he said what he said. Really?
I think you're completely right about the mental health side of things. I know that in fact, my wife has been saying that she has been feeling really down. Like the coronavirus is already, I think for most people can agree that the isolation and the loneliness that comes from coronavirus has affected us all. For God's sakes, how much do you just want to go to a restaurant right now, right? I mean,
dude, we lost spring.
Yeah,
it was a quarter of a year.
Maybe it's not a big deal in Conus, but I can tell you on Hoth, missing spring is a big damn deal.
The only sun and happiness you have for the year.
Right, we missed a long period of time, and I think everybody's feeling down from that already. And then this happens. I can only particularly imagine what it's like for Black people to how they feel during this time, because they must feel isolated and now victimized even more so.
And I do want to address something along that transition. A couple things. One, to you, Kupchak, I want to say right off the bat that it is valid, as I've been seeing from friends who've reached out to me and others who've just been trying to process, that it is valid for everyone to be coming up with their own ways to process everything that's going on. For some people, that is shutting off some social media feeds because sometimes it can be too much, both good and bad, or just reality. It can be too much, and I understand that for some. I know for myself, I try to allow a bit of everything in so that I keep awareness, but I am not asking anyone else to do with that. Because we each have to deal with how isolation from COVID has happened, how the inappropriate behavior of police has happened, and everything we're being inundated with from it. So don't anybody out there feel like there's a one answer for how you need to be feeling to react to this. It's okay.
Everybody's different.
Yeah, and what you're experiencing is valid. I do
totally
recommend that if you're trying to come up with better ways to experience and such, to look at reaching out to other people to I invite discussion to come to me. That it's one of those things that feel free to talk to someone about whatever it is you're experiencing. I think it's important. It's something that may need,
I think anything that's like an important cause. Okay, this is kind of a side note. I realize this, but in my opinion, mental health should be taken just as seriously as physical health. If you're feeling yourself being impaired and you feel like you can't function properly, you're feeling down to a level that is worrying or concerning, take a break. It doesn't mean you have to ignore it forever, but you can certainly take a break from these things and return to them when you're feeling healthier. You wouldn't ask somebody to go marching on a broken leg, just like you wouldn't expect somebody who's having mental health issues from being, particularly depressed from all the ongoings online, to take part in it continually.
Sorry. Go ahead, Ken.
I was just going to say that I know that my wife's, like I said, she's been struggling with these topics as well, because she's finding it really tiresome, and she's been having dreams about this stuff now. She's struggling to sleep because of it. My wife has experienced some forms of racism when she was younger as well, and knows what it's like to an extent. It's just a really tough time, and you have to remember there's two ways to combat it. One is take breaks from social media, and two is to do your part and help out. Be retweeting important figures retweeting Black voices who need to be heard. Use your platform to help people out who need to be heard. You can actually take part from your home and so on. And again, we'll talk more at the end about how to help out. My point is that helping out in general can make you feel, it can help relieve some of that stress on your mind.
Yep.
Yeah, I think. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, it's coming up on a year now since I deleted my Twitter altogether. Like
Yeah.
cold turkey, just got out of it.
Well
No,
done.
seriously, I'll tell you what. Like I somewhat sarcastically did a bad job of curating my Twitter feed because Sun Tzu, know thine enemy.
Yep. No, that's what I'm doing.
And it was finally Mog who said to me, all you do when you look at Twitter is get mad.
That's good.
Yeah,
And it's like, again, I'm investing this just absurd emotional toll reading people that I don't actually agree with, but like I want to make fun of them.
Yeah.
Because, whatever.
I unfollowed Trump for that reason. Yep.
And the guy's Twitter feed is high comedy. Like, how can you not? How could you just, well, we'll talk about that
yeah.
perhaps later.
Yeah. I think...
But back to your point, Kupchak, I am struggling, and I say struggling in the present tense, to not get deeply, deeply cynical about everything that's going on now, because of what everybody is going to be asked to do come November.
Oh, yeah. Yep, that's going to be...
Right? So the guy who invented the criminal justice system as it stands today, or a large part of it, is the presumptive candidate of a major political party in America for president. Right? And it's not the only problem, and it's not even the lion's share of this particular problem, but it's a part of the overall problem. I was at Center for American Progress, had a huge article on talking about the pipeline of minority kids from school to prison.
Yeah.
They talked about the fact that prisoners do not have access to Pell Grants to get higher education once they're incarcerated, right? This is a big deal. You are going to be asked, and in fact, slightly hyperbolically demanded to vote for him in November.
Yeah.
Say what you want to about the political process up to this point and 4 years ago and so on and so forth, right? You're like, I don't want to vote for Donald Trump. I didn't the first time, right? And I became, and this was so stupid of me, I wanted to believe because of the things that he was talking about from a policy perspective when he was campaigning. Like he was talking about unfair trade deals and those type of things, like the substantive policy stuff that I kind of care about.
Mm-hmm.
And like he was walking and quacking like a populist, and I went, ooh, like we've had 50 years of globalist neoliberalism, and it has failed so catastrophically that we're finally we're going to get something different. Finally.
Yeah, I mean, I know that as my outsider perspective, and I know we're moving away slightly from the main topic here, but I know that as a British person with a different understanding of politics, in Scotland we have our own little Scottish government, and then we also have the British government, and then until recently we also had the European government, all of which could govern laws for our areas, right? So you can think of that as kind of like local, state, and federal, I guess, if you want to, but it's not quite like that. So, and coming here, it's crazy because it's a two-party system here, and it's one of two candidates. That is just so non-democratic to me. I can't understand how this is a system that people are happy with, and there isn't massive wants for changes. Because right now, and I think this is a very appropriate thing, and I'm not trying to say they both are definitively. I think they're both predators, but I saw somebody say that it's not vote for who you want president; it's vote for which rapist you think is the better rapist. I don't think they are both rapists. I think they're probably both predators for sure. But still, I don't want to be slanderous here. I don't want to tell any untruths. But I think that's a horrible state of affairs. But that's what the choices are.
Well, so less sort of deviation onto this topic. it's also been a catastrophic failure of the sense-making institutions in both the United States but also in Britain.
Yeah.
Let's just take recent events into account. Let's say the last 5 years. Right?
Yeah.
They lied about Trump and Russia. They lied about the Covington High School kids. There's a discontinuity in the way that the Christine Blasey Ford allegations were treated compared to the Tara Reade allegations, right? And these are things that you do not have to be particularly with it in order to see.
No.
So if I know, to go back to sort of to tie this whole thing off, if I know that the sense-making institutions in America and Britain are lying to me about stuff that, about simple things that it would be easy to get correct, like what are they doing about the really complicated stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it is concerning to try to figure out where to actually get valid information these days. And unfortunately, I think that has left a vacuum that is being filled by a lot of non-valid information throughout, and people feeling comfortable accepting some very suspect information sources. And I think it leads us further and further down the path of people doing what feels best, what supports their narrative that makes them comfortable, versus actually trying to base their thoughts off of hard facts, essentially. Before we go too far off this, I did want to invite Kupchak for you to give us some perspective on what you have witnessed locally for you, because we're all having our own places of what we've seen around us. What have you seen, or what is your feeling of your own neighborhood, your own city, kind of both what has blossomed or kind of happened in response to George Floyd's murder, as well as what's happened because of it and where you are today? Is there anything you'd like to share?
Well, there has been, I want to say, weekly, if not bi-weekly, gatherings and protesting. If it's not official, people powder the streets of downtown and walk with a purpose.
Okay.
Yeah.
They or we, because I lump myself into that, even though I haven't been able to get out and be active as a part of it, because I am very paranoid about the COVID-19 situation.
It's understandable.
And I see it happening around my area. Like within the tri-state area, there has been multiple protests in Arkansas. Arkansas only the cities in that state, as far as I'm aware, only limit to a 1 hour protest.
Interesting.
Which to me is not enough.
That's ridiculous. I mean, that can be safely ignored, you know? What's the point in a protest if it doesn't upset something, if it doesn't change people's mindsets and can be seen and heard?
Right. And I personally think that it's like with the situation that happened to get us to this point, it is kind of weird. The ability to have a peaceful protest without blocking traffic, right? It is possible. It is doable. Go to a park. Go powder the sidewalks of streets. Get your voices heard. But the main thoroughfare, there's two bridges that go from West Tennessee into Arkansas. Both bridges were blocked, both ways of traffic. And me personally, blocking traffic has got to be one of the most dangerous things that one can do.
Yeah, that's not. I don't condone that whatsoever. That blocks ambulances. That doesn't help anybody.
It blocks ambulances. It blocks people getting to work. How awkward would it be if if I had to take that route to go to work every day and call my boss and I can't make it due to a protest.
Yeah, and you would be the one who would lose out from that, not the business, right? They would take away your hours and you wouldn't get paid for it, and it's somehow your fault.
Either that or fire me.
Yeah.
But I just cannot believe that it takes death to get the point across, because there has been videos, y'all have talked about them, that I've personally seen on Twitter about a African American male who gets pulled over by a white cop and has his gun drawn. Why is this happening?
Yeah.
Period.
That shows an extreme lack of training as well, if nothing else. I mean, regardless of all the obvious racial parts of that, I think the fact that a police officer thinks that's ever acceptable is insane.
Well, and there's a lot to go around that. No, Kupchak, it is crazy, and I can understand a lot of people feeling like, how did we get here? And I think that's why it's important, if people are open to really answering that question. Earthweaver mentioned it in the comments earlier. I posted a link to the wiki about it. I actually just recently watched it myself. The film, basically a documentary style film called The 13th. It's available on Netflix and likely other places from a couple of years back, that talks in ways of helping people understand why the police system, the laws that are in state and things like that in this nation, specifically United States, have come to where they are today and where enforcement is today, that it can be argued in a lot of ways that this being systemic is an example of when slavery was made illegal, the way to make it legal again was through policing and throwing people in prison and creating institutionalized labor through the prison system and things like that. It puts forth some ideas with that, but I invite people to check out the documentary. I can't talk about all the nuance of it in the context of our show today.
That could be its own episode, I'm sure. Yeah.
But it is something to take in, again, as another source of information that might help expand people's understanding of this discussion specifically.
So first of all, before I speak, thank you, Kupchak, for joining us on the show. We much appreciate you hearing your voice and hearing your thoughts. That was very kind of you. I would also like to say that I think when it comes to the prison system and the racism inherent within it, largely comes from, like many of the problems in the U.S., the capitalistic, for some reason, privatized prisons. Why are people profiting off of people being in prison? Where the more prisoners, the more money they make. Why incentivize it? That is insane. And prisons should be a drain on society. You should see them as something that is an unwelcome thing and a sad requirement. And they should be there sheerly for the purpose of putting away those who are, for whatever reason, unable to rejoin society. And I don't want to delve into that too much. But most importantly, they're to rehabilitate those to join society again. People should be leaving with qualifications and have internships or positions lined up for them upon leaving. And it should be a system for helping these people get back to society, like most of Northern Europe does this, right? And I'm sure you can speak to this, Todd, as well. But I'm also aware this is something of a tangent, talking about the prison system. Should we instead talk about... I really want to move on to the discussion of the riots in particular.
Yeah, so I wanted to talk about the protests and kind of frame that in specific, because I want to make sure we do leave time at the end of the show for course of actions and some of the things coming out of this. So we've seen these protests throughout the nation. I will comment to some degree and share that I, in Denver, have had the opportunity to go visit and see some of the protests happening at the Capitol here. I do share people's concerns about COVID-19. One of the things that has bothered me significantly is how some people, again, trying to dismiss the message of the protests, have made off-color comments of things like, what, is COVID not an issue anymore? Kind of things, because they're now seeing large gatherings of people. I will tell you from my own perspective, having gone, a lot of people are still trying to maintain social distancing. We have people wearing masks because those are there to minimize transmission of stuff in situations where social distancing cannot be maintained. But at the same time, I will tell you, yeah, guess what? COVID's still out there, but this is enough of an issue that people are recognizing and seeing as still being a major problem today that needs to be resolved now, that they're willing to risk the things that will come along with COVID to ensure this doesn't just go away again. It doesn't just get buried again or ignored again about all the problems that are happening with the way police are treating people. And so this is the more relevant issue today. At the moment, it has the highest priority. And so that's...
Todd, I think, said this very well at the start of the show. He said that it's kind of set the perfect ground. It is like the perfect kindling for this fire, isn't it? Everybody's been stuck inside for months. We're waiting for, we don't want to leave the house or our homes until there's a good reason to do so. And suddenly there's a very good reason and people are coming out in force. Yeah. And I'm not necessarily going to stand and say that I agree with the fact that everybody's protesting in mass. Because I've seen lots of people are not social distancing. I largely believe that's due to ignorance rather than intent. And I said the same thing with the protests for the freedom rights that's been here in Michigan a month ago, for people saying that, you know, being forced to stay at home is against freedom. I don't believe that whatsoever. And I think the protests were really unfair and a really poor time. Now the numbers have improved. The hospitals have gotten, you know, they're better prepared, and I think they can handle more cases. However, I think that we still need to socially distance to an extreme at protests. Like they say 6 feet minimum, but really you should be trying to aim for like 12 to 16 feet away from each other. I really do believe that.
I just, sorry, Ken, to your point, I remember when I started watching the Royal Labs YouTube live stream that goes 24/7, giving data on infection rates and so on and so forth. And I just remember watching the first days as it looked like Norway's infection rate was like N to the N.
Yeah.
Like it went 1-4-27.
Yeah.
And it was just like, oh God, like, and the Mistress of Giggles is in the high risk group if she gets it. So we went on pretty heavy lockdown, fairly early on. And so for the people that have been, you know, in their homes, some large number of them are unemployed at this point. Right? Yeah. Have either been furloughed or have lost their jobs outright. What is it, 40 million in the United States now? I think it crossed 40 million.
It has started improving, but yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, so those people, you know, some number of them don't have jobs, terrified by a pandemic, and not to go down this rabbit hole, but all the information and revelations that have come out about it over the last 6 to 8 weeks. And now we have this. And now we have this egregious, unacceptable catastrophe happen. Yeah. And it just was going to explode.
Yeah, I think that this is a perfect storm in many ways, and I'm really concerned as to what this could turn into. I mean, I hope that it turns into, you know, the government sees the truth behind these people and they want to help them, and all is good in the world again, and, you know, order is restored, and equal rights are established properly in a magic fairyland world. Yeah. In reality, I mean, it's the perfect storm, perfect fire. So far, the response from the government has been deploy more police, deploy the National Guard, potentially deploy the army. So, which is insane, by the way.
So I guess we should talk about that now, right?
Yeah, no, this is the time. We're talking about the fact that there are protests, but they have turned into other things. And one of the big ones is, yes, has rioting and looting occurred around some of the major protests? It has. Again, from my own personal experience, when I was at the protests in Denver, I could see the different groups there, the groups of people who were there that were honestly just protesting, trying to get a message out there, and then surprising amounts of people who seemed to gather on the fringe, who weren't part of the protests, but were seeming to be there as either just looky-loos, like, what's going on? I want to see this. And in other cases, people that looked like they were there waiting for something else to happen. And I definitely saw a difference in the way people were interacting and some of those groups, and it transitioned more and more. The ratios changed the later it got and the closer, at least here in Denver, to when there was curfew time set, that towards curfew, most of the protesters seemed to start to dissipate. Whereas other people who started showing up, who maybe were carrying things to deflect potential rubber bullets and stuff like that, started showing up. And so I do want to say that I had a feeling that there were different groups. People who are there to get a message across, and then people who are there to take advantage of a large gathering of people, be it for good or bad.
I would also like to highlight that, of course, this is largely about the actions of police in the U.S. and how they treat African Americans and anybody they deem to be dissident, right? And I think that it's the scariest thing I've seen from all this is you would think that they would try to reduce this perspective that people have with them, that the police are violent and poorly trained and prone to overreacting. But now we're seeing all these videos and other media being produced of, in fact, one of the craziest ones I saw was 2 days ago. It was a 4-lane road, right? And in the middle were all these protesters, in this crossroads, traffic-wise or something. And you saw, this was apparently 20 minutes before curfew, 10 minutes before curfew was enabled, and the police were surrounding the protesters on all four sides. And you could see the protesters were roaming around trying to escape, and the police weren't breaking their line. They weren't letting them leave because they were waiting for curfew so that they had a reason to go after these protesters. Similarly, there's been a video that was produced of a police officer who, I think a couple of citizens went up to the police officer and said, "Sir, excuse me, what happens when curfew's instated?" I think they were just worried and wanted some information. And the police officer turned around and says, "We're going to beat the shit out of you."
So,
and admittedly, again, right, anecdotal, couple of incidents.
Well, so here's the thing.
That's not all people.
The problem is there's lots of video evidence of these things happening. So I brought up that initial piece of trying to set the stage from my perspective, what I witnessed of the protest itself, because I did not stick around for the potential change of that energy. Mm-hmm. I was in an area that I could hear and stuff when there were some tear gas things shot and things. Mm-hmm. This was, I think, Sunday night in Denver. The last time I believe there was actual police interaction with the protests in Denver.
Wayne, was there anything about the groups themselves that would let you sort of identify maybe who or what or
what their intents
they were
were?
Organized, what organization they were with,
or
anything like that?
Not really. Okay. I could tell, like I said, a certain way they were interacting in the groups from the protester side, where you saw the ones who were there legitimately participating, those who were waiting, and those who kind of just looked like they showed up for something else. I will say that there were certain groups later and I went back to protests later throughout the week where you could tell there was a certain nervous energy around some of the younger individuals there. One of my friends posted this or commented, we discussed about saying it did seem like there were some people who they've never protested before and they were learning how, if that makes any sense. Like, something that we have a history of it in the United States and all over the world, but this next generation, this is one of their first big ones hitting. But there were people, because there were a lot of people showing up there for the protests with water and things like that to support a lot of med stations, things like that. But there were people, and one of my big complaints, because I saw it during the day, one of the groups there, this is going to be me using actual descriptions of people from a racial perspective, but a lot of young white folks showing up for what looked like their Instagram moment, where they were wearing more what would be considered anarchist type things of skull face coverings and stuff like that, punkish wear, and legitimately taking selfies next to some of the vandalism, the graffiti type vandalism on the Capitol building stuff, specifically the anarchy symbols and stuff like that people had posted, which I truly did not believe represented the protesters there. There were people looking to latch on to the energy that was in the area. And there have been a lot of videos of people, and I'm going to kind of jump the gun a little bit, but a lot of videos of people instigating. I'd mentioned before, there was the very egregious one of the person white male in full what looked like riot type gear, but full covered black gear and a gas mask, carrying an umbrella, who was smashing out windows at an AutoZone essentially while there was a peaceful protest in the area. Came up, smashed the windows to basically open it up for looting, walked away and left the scene, had no interactions with anyone there. So again, I do believe there are people there instigating. There's been examples they showed where police officers were actually in the area prior to any protests happening, causing issues. There was thoughts of cars being planted, like police cars being planted and lit on fire prior to protesters entering an area. There have been examples of police officers watching and encouraging a white woman putting up graffiti on a Starbucks, specifically writing things and telling her how to spell things. And one of my responses from a person of color's perspective is, I appreciate people who want to support the effort and have the energy. However, it serves us no benefit if you take that opportunity and add to the problem. So if you are not, because I don't condone looting and rioting at all, but I do say I understand the frustration that builds up to it. And so if you are someone that's going to add to the potential powder keg of something breaking off of a protest and becoming something else, you are hurting it. And I believe there are people doing it willfully. And I believe there are sometimes some people who think they're helping, but in my opinion are actually hurting the cause, if you will. So I will say, if you are not black and you're at a protest or something, please do not, break anything, tag anything, cause physical interaction with the police unless it is to perhaps act as a barrier from other people, because there may be an opportunity that you not being black may limit the response of the police in the area. Please do not aggravate the situation that is actually a detriment to the message of the protests. I'll put that out.
Absolutely.
In addition, when it comes to that transition from peaceful to other things, there have been so many examples, video evidence, where it appears from me watching that it was the police officers in the situation who escalated things beyond just words. Because as much as you may see people acting in an aggressive way verbally to police officers and lines of cops, it is completely legal for you as a citizen to voice your opinion, First Amendment again, even if it's in somewhat nasty ways that people think could be over the top, until such time as you touch someone, throw something, do something to aggravate it. It is legal. So if you ever see a police officer put hands on a person who is just yelling at them, that goes beyond their right, and it takes away from your right to assemble and discuss. And so when I've seen examples of police looking like they are the ones instigating the violence and changing things from a protest to something else, that bothers me. And it seems like there's more than just a handful of examples of that.
Yeah. In the end, if you want to join a protest, do it for the right reasons and try to help. Don't try and be a hindrance, no matter, regardless of your skin color, right? Whether you're black or white, don't go in there and try to do things that are going to encourage the police to attack. Because, I can understand why it's useful in some respects to entice the police to do something that would make them look bad. I get that, but that's just as immoral as police baiting, right? You shouldn't do the opposite.
Could they look worse?
Well, yeah.
Well, yes, actually, they continue to prove they can. The examples of police officers walking off the job because they were mad other police officers got charged for knocking over the elderly white man and causing his ears to bleed. And since two of them, people walking off their thing in support of the officers being suspended pending an investigation. The officers who are quitting because people have put forth the idea that we need to demilitarize the police force, and the idea that now, admittedly, some tags being represented differently than others, because I can speak to some of the things you hear and some of the responses from it, of saying, get rid of the police. In essence, for those who don't understand or hear that and think that means you want there to be no policing around the country at all, what it means is to disassemble and get rid of the current state of the police that essentially that allows this systemic things. And thank you, Babs. Yes, in that specific case for the elderly man, they didn't walk off the job. They left that specific emergency response team. There were a set of sheriffs who essentially quit because they were hearing the rhetoric about, all the negativity towards police. Understand, everyone, when you hear the negativity towards police and those things like ACAB and stuff like that, a lot of that is due to one of the other discussions about this is that because this is all about police brutality, yes, there are people I would like to believe are good police officers there to do the right thing. But if we do not, as the public, see those good police officers policing their own ranks and charging and stopping when bad police officers do the same thing, do the bad things, then what we get is the essence of a complicit police force willing to allow bad police officers to do whatever they want, which tends to make it feel like you have nothing but a systemically bad police force. And there's been memes to try to talk to put it in simple terms. Things like if you have 10 bad cops and 1,000 good cops who don't do anything about the bad cops, you have 1,010 bad cops. We don't currently have the means to police you. And so if you don't take it upon yourselves to stop other police officers from doing bad, essentially you're part of the problem. And that's where that rhetoric comes from.
It's kind of fascinating, isn't it? I mean, any other time in the world, if you were attacked unfairly by somebody, you'd be, especially in America, you'd have the complete right for self-defense, right? And here in Michigan, you can stand your ground laws, right? You can literally shoot somebody who touches you without permission. But if it's a police officer, you gotta just let them do it. It's madness, the fact that they're getting away with this power.
And it's crazy. I posted a very specific video of a person at a police stop who had looked to black man being stopped for speeding, with a white officer being very aggressive to him and not giving him an opportunity of knowing why he was being detained for the first time part for most of the video, and asking him to put his hands behind his back, to comply and all those things. And the gentleman saying, what did I do? What did I do? And the cop being very aggressive without even giving him an option. I posted it with a question to those I know who are police officers who are friended with me on social media. If I were in that situation, what would you as a police officer recommend I do to ensure I am doing the right thing? Because guess what, as a citizen, and this leads to bigger discussion points I have, and people want to talk to me about specifically, feel free, or email in and ask more. But I, as a citizen, have never been trained as to what I'm supposed to do, how I'm supposed to act, or whatever things to keep myself safe in the presence of police officers. And this speaks to, Ken, what you're saying, and we might want to transition towards it, Ken, but I do want to give Todd another chance for you to respond about the training aspect of what needs to happen, because police officers do get training on how to deal with citizens, but citizens don't get training on how to deal with police officers. So I feel like there's a huge double standard and expectation of how we are supposed to respond when confronted by police officers. And I say that because there's a lot of people who say, if he had just complied, he wouldn't have been shot. If he had just done this, this wouldn't have happened, even though there are so many examples on video of people complying, still getting shot. Black cosplayer that had a sword who did everything he was supposed to do, even though it was all prop, who got shot and killed because the police didn't understand. White man in a hotel who is complying with a police officer responds because there's a fear of something, gets shot and killed. There's too many examples of it out there. Todd, as we were talking about this, I want to give you a chance back in, because then we're going to try to use the last bit of this show to talk a little bit about course of action going forward, even though I know we can't cover everything.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, no, I don't know how to be more outraged. Right? And Mog and I have these discussions all the time, because she's big on the privilege theory, sort of postmodernist philosophy set, and my response is very commonly, okay, I'm aware, now what?
Yep.
Like, what do I do? Like, I try to live as reasonably as I can, my best self. Right? Is that enough? Like,
it's a numbers game, right?
Well, sure. I agree. It is a numbers game. Like, we need more of us than them. But I don't know who them is. Right? So that's that is where a lot of my personal struggles come in. Like, yes, I'm outraged about this. I was outraged in 92.
Yep. This isn't new.
Right? Right? And those cops got off.
Yeah.
Totally. Right? So, like, you know, if you if you have a full outrage tank, where does it go? Well, into the streets. But from an individualist perspective, I don't know. I don't know what to do.
Gotcha.
So this is part of the reason why I approached you guys about doing the show tonight. Like, it's an infinitesimally small thing to spend 2 hours of time talking about this with you guys, right? And in the grand scheme of things, it is almost irrelevant. But
Gotcha.
Yet, like, because we get to hear Wayne speak about it, and I trust Wayne more than average people on YouTube or Instagram or whatever.
For sure, yeah.
Right? So, this is probably going to sound well. So here, I'm hedging a lot because it's going to sound uncaring, but I want to fix this.
Good,
right?
Yeah.
And we three are engineers, right? I am a box checker to the max. So I want to fix this problem and be done and move on to the next problem.
Understandable,
right? And this problem doesn't work that way. Like, I know that in the back of my head, and yet, like, I'm outraged because there's a problem. I'm frustrated because I personally can't fix the problem other than do my infinitesimally small thing that doesn't matter.
Yep.
And I'm doubly frustrated because I want to fix the problem, and I think I have good ideas of how to fix the problem. But again, I'm one person.
That struggle is real. That is very real. And
I've seen some. Sorry, Wayne, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Well, I was just saying, I can only imagine that there are a lot of people out there that feel very similar, Todd. One of my friends reached out locally to me saying we're going to hang out anyways, but saying, hey, before we do, could we go down to the protests? I'd really feel more comfortable if you came with me. You said you've been there before and I want to experience and such, because she, being a young white woman, experiencing and seeing all this, being very empathetic, didn't know what to do. She was sitting on the sidelines saying, I want to respond, I want to say something, but I have no idea what. I'm still processing. And so I was like, yeah, let's go. And we went, we observed. I gave her an opportunity to talk about what she experienced. We marched along with some to a degree to let her see what was happening. And one, it helped her get past some of the fear she felt about the protests themselves, because she'd only seen so much of the worst examples of things, and especially the police response to them, that she was afraid to be a part of. But it helped her at least start to process some of her feelings. And I've seen her since start to share some things and speak up online. But that's part of where in the same way I responded to Kupchak, saying what you're feeling, what you're going through is valid. In the same way, when it comes to support, I know a lot of people are trying to find the right outlet to make their voice heard or feel like they're doing something appropriately, something that benefits in the long term, because yeah, man, do we want to fix things now. But considering this is a 400-year-old issue, I doubt we're going to get it done in a week, guys. It's just not going to happen. And so what I advocate for personally is one thing to be aware, because this kind of got touched in some of the discussion, both in our chat and even Kupchak mentioned a little bit, was, yes, wouldn't it be nice if we had consolidated leadership from a countrywide thing that gave us a direction as to how to move forward and grow as a country? That'd be great. Are we getting it? No. And you can have all the further discussions about what that means, as Todd, you were saying, towards November and other things happening, if this is what we want from those positions. But in reality, when it comes to how the police behave, if you focus on that issue, along with the idea of systemic racism and why it exists throughout the country, and why there are examples you can see of opportunities that aren't exercised equally amongst all groups, my biggest thing I ask from anyone who wants to help, and this is Wayne's opinion, not informed from the whole Black community or anything like that, but one, to be aware that you want to help is a great thing. finding whatever means to start is great. It is good. It doesn't have to be, I'm going to go through and bleed for this cause. It doesn't have to be. But what I really do hope is, at minimum, when you see things that are being done to diminish a message, to try to bury what's happening because it's uncomfortable, please take a moment to look at that, especially if it's something you find yourself doing, even if it's unintentional, and let yourself have that hard interaction, that uncomfortable moment, to really investigate what it means to you. Let yourself maybe respond to an ill-informed information online to better the conversation by making sure it's informed. Hopefully anyone who's seen my post, they'll see that I'm not trying to put forth an argument. I'm trying to put forth information, discussion, to invoke people to think further about what their own opinions are, and to start there. And to allow yourself fuel for all of those things, let alone more direct course of action and things you can do. Please educate yourself. We recommended a few things you can see, and just examples. We came from Van Dorn to the 13th to, I recommend heavily, Colin Powell just responded about some things from high ups responses to former presidents, not just President Obama, but also former President Bush, have responded to the situation. So while we may not be getting some of the direction we'd like from on top of our current administration, there are examples of people who have been in similar situations who are putting forth messages of peace, of building, of growth that I think people should pay attention to. But do what you can to educate yourself, not only on where we are today, but how we got here. Because as silly as those things sound about history is doomed to repeat itself if we don't learn from it, there's truth to that. And I myself, well, and it's one of those things, just because I have blackness in me doesn't mean I am informed to the nth degree by itself.
No.
I just went and watched the 13th. Another one I posted, and I played it right before the show, and it just hit me hard yesterday when I experienced it myself, was the Childish Gambino video, not just a song, but the video for This Is America. When it came out 2 years ago, I saw it and was a little confused and was like, okay, yeah, I see what you're saying. Watching it again yesterday, almost a dozen times, because of the nuance in that video, hit me hard.
Oh,
and I was in tears from it, and how much that hit. And so all of us have room to learn. All of us have room to grow. And what I really invite from all of you out there is to give that to yourself. Give yourself that room and that understanding that it is okay to grow, and it is okay to be where you're at and to get to somewhere better and to go towards that. So that is my generalistic for everyone, like just words of wisdom I'm trying to provide, as well as I'll provide a little more specifics. I don't know if that helps you, Todd, because I know there's I've seen that bubbling of emotion coming from people of trying to process, I have a desire, I really want to help, what do I do?
Yeah, it does. It does sound. Yeah, I still don't know. I still don't know what it all means yet.
Yes, that answer will be unique to all of us.
Yeah, sure. And I feel somewhat. I feel somewhat like I've not done my part. So there's an organization for people that are allied. Sorry to make this political again, but it's interconnected. Like we have to.
Yeah.
There's an organization for all Americans living abroad who are aligned with the political parties. Like for the Democrats, it's called Democrats Abroad. I know the Republicans have something similar as well. They both show up to the 4th of July thing that they have in Oslo.
Okay.
They go down to Frognerparken and they classic cars and like a low grade American festival on the 4th of July. Okay. Anyway, or around the 4th of July. Anyway, so DA put their platform statement out and opened it up for comments from the membership. And I read it over and was disappointed in it as I knew I would be, but I really only had the heart to give comments on one section, and it's like, well, if you had given this the effort that you should have given it, like, you would have bled all over the thing. But so yeah, I feel farther away now than I ever have since I moved.
Gotcha.
Right?
Yeah.
And like, you guys are a fingertip away. Like, I can have contact with you, or with John Paul, or Kazuyuri, or Shadow Vice is in the chat. Like I can get in contact with you guys anytime I want to. Right? So it's never really felt to me, or my parents, or my sister. So it's never really felt like I'm that far away.
Yeah.
Like, I feel the smallness of the world. And yet now, like, it feels farther away to me than it ever has. Even like back in 2009 when I was first coming here. Get the concept of flying over an ocean, and I'm traveling all this distance, and it's like, just, I don't know. I feel very far away.
Understandably, yeah. I think America, as you knew it, has changed massively. And I think the America I landed in is different than the America of just 2 years ago as well, or 4 years ago especially.
Scarily, I will argue that it really hasn't. It's just a little more visible.
Yeah.
And that's, I hate to say, but no, Todd, yeah, that separation I can understand. So to follow on with that being my kind of holistic for people who are trying to find where they're at today emotionally with this, I did want to provide some concrete. And so from myself and representation of Show X, I did want to put out one of the things that I'd learned about. And when we try to focus on what can you actually do, what can you actually change, from a local perspective, when it comes to how your individual police departments and things act, that is a local issue, not a federal one. And so you need to be able to respond and deal with things locally. One resource that might give you some things as possible course of actions, things that have been coordinated and put together as options for ways to help with police response. You've heard some of these kind of ideas put from Ken already, but there's a site out there, 8cantwait.org, which is very specifically designed to talk about some changes and reforms that can be done today to your local areas through your mayoral office, through local government and stuff like that, that can make changes. And I will tell you, this is some of those outcries and the positive that has come out from the notice that's been made worldwide from the protests and even the riots, has been faster action from lawmakers to create some changes. And unfortunately, where a lot of people feel like this is going to be a hard thing when you see the damage and stuff from protests, it was proven even from Martin Luther King that people like to invoke his name and say stuff. I'm going to bring this up. There's a sense of white folk get Martin Luther King out your mouth, is that a lot of people have been only presenting a certain view of like the peace discussion things without also being honest to the fact that Dr. King talked about the things that led to where it goes out of hand and where rioting becomes valid after protests. And also, nothing really changed until Dr. King was murdered and riots came out across the country for 6 days before the Civil Rights Act was actually passed. So don't you dare say that Martin Luther King would have understood the rioting and looting and the extreme protest. Don't you dare try to educate black folk on what Martin Luther King Jr. would have wanted. Suggestion. Just, that gets me more than most.
Yeah, go tell it to his corpse. Yeah.
But like I said, these 8 things you can do, 8 can't wait locally. They involve things about changing the use of force for police, demilitarization, consent degrees, contracts for police unions, divesting from police, all these things that can be done. And what's nice about this specific site is you can put in your local city and it'll point to who your mayor is and some of the specific issues that either exist or can be fixed to do those things. So this is a direct forward course of action that can happen to look at that. Because some of the things people have talked about is ensuring that all the evidence there is always available. body cams and things like that, and putting consequence to when they're shut off and things like that. Putting consequence for when decisions are made that could have been done differently, like Ken has said about escalation and things. So I invite you to look at some of these resources. If you want to find courses of action you could do today, things you can support, people you can contact right now, as well as feel free to donate to causes. If your energy today is such that all you can really provide is a little bit of funds to keep messages out there and for other people to work that issue further, donate. That's great. I'm a big advocate of putting your own time and effort forth, but I know that's not the right answer for everyone. And at minimum, I'll push as we end the show here. Get educated yourself. Nothing helps fight these systemic wrongs and misunderstandings between people than having that background information yourself and not just relying on the easy, convenient memes that people push. Please research for yourself. Go beyond the headline, go beyond the click, and see what it is that's really behind something, and be diligent upon what you share yourself and the things that you like and promote. Please educate. Take the time to learn what's really behind it.
Can I double emphasize that point of education? There's nothing worse you can do for the cause than sharing misinformation, even if you think it will help your side. If you share things that are lies, like saying in 2015 the police killed 3 billion black people, they didn't, right? So don't say that. That doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help black people. It doesn't help your cause. It might help the opposing cause. That's it. Don't share misinformation. If you see an article that you think is really interesting and really speaks to your point, and I think it's going to be helpful to share, you can share it, but look into it first. Look at the source, see where it's coming from, see if it's valid. I've seen people sharing stuff that's like, oh my God, I can't believe the police did that, but it turns out to be 6 years ago. And while it's an important message to still share, if it's 6 years ago, a lot of people will find it invalid and irrelevant to the current discussion. So please educate yourself, look at your sources, think carefully about what you're sharing. And the other major thing I really want to share, aside from donating and aside from giving black people voices by retweeting them and stuff on Twitter, etc., is every little helps. If you come from a racist family, if you were raised in a racist family, I've talked to people online who've had this experience where they find themselves with some racist thoughts that they feel guilty about, that they have learned consciously or wrong through their own experiences upon leaving their hometown, etc. That's okay. The fact that you're coming to realize that your upbringing had some inconsistencies and were incorrect and wrong, the fact that you're trying to overcome that is a brilliant and beautiful thing. Do not be put down by that. The fact that you're actively trying to overcome it is fantastic. And you know what? You can still help the cause. You can still help out people in need and people who need to share. You need to share their voice as well. You can still come forward and do that. Talk to your families, talk to your friends, try and convince them and help them see the truth of the situation and what equality should exist and where there are inconsistencies in the equality in the US. Same with if you don't feel like you fully understand everything, if you feel like you're not smart enough, if you feel like you don't have enough of an audience that your retweeting won't help, it will. Every little helps. This is a group effort. It's not just about, the top people like Obama saying things and retweeting things and putting up videos. The person with 3 followers on Twitter could make a difference, and that can cause a landslide. You never know. Share your experiences, use your voice for the greater good, because every little really does help. That's my talking point above what Wayne's already said here. So I won't repeat what else you've said there, Wayne. I thank you for sharing it. Todd, I'll give you your opportunity here. I don't mind us going over too much with this because it's obviously a good message to send. So Todd, please tell us your thoughts.
Systemic change is a long game.
Yeah.
So it's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take the diligence of a whole lot of people for a really, really long time. And as I think it was Ken that said, or Wayne, no, it was Wayne, you said it, we're not going to get this done in a week.
No.
As much as I want to, right? I want this, as I said before, I want this done with. I want to check the box that says, yep, we covered this and we can move on to the next problem. So, I guess just be prepared to settle in for the long push, and it's gonna and it's multi-leveled, right? So it's city councils and county boards and state legislatures and writing your Congress people and writing your senators and sending tweets to the Orange Man and it's just, yeah, I want so bad for us to fix it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh, thank you. I
thank
really
you
appreciate
for
it.
that, Todd. I have one more thing to share as well, and it's not so much a call to arms. If you can donate, first of all, do to these organizations that already exist. We're going to do our little part this month. Our Patreon funds from this month, the end of this month, will be going towards most likely the link that was put in chat. 8 Can't Wait, and we will be sure that all Patreon money from this month will not go to anything in the show. It's going to go towards helping achieve a higher level of quality in the little that we can do. So please donate your money towards those funds as well. That's much appreciated. And thank you all Patreon supporters. Your money is going to help this as well. And we appreciate all the funds that you've given us to help us put forward into this charitable cause as well. So thank you, Wayne, for organizing this show and making sure that we dedicated the over 2 hours of each of our time here to discuss a really important issue. And every little does help. So we appreciate you organizing this. Thank you, Wayne.
No, of course.
Thanks, Wayne.
Yeah, and this is something for everyone out there. While we felt this important issue, we understand it's not always, you guys sometimes like just the jovial lightness from us, but at the same time, we're happy to continue to tackle some of these tough issues and have this discussion, if nothing else, not necessarily on your behalf, but so that you can hear some of the conversation being held around something. So please let us know if there's other issues you'd like us to look at, if there's concerns you've had, as well as I absolutely invite and welcome you to contact us if you want to hear more from us about these subjects, even privately outside of the show. Feel free to email us at vtwshowx@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. And feel free to share in your own stories, thoughts, and things like that to us as well. We'd love to hear from you. So thank you. Please continue the conversation. And with that, Ken, if you'll lead us out.
Sure thing. You've been listening to Show X live on twitch.tv/VTWShowX. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to follow and subscribe to us. We very much appreciate all of your guys' support. You make the show absolutely worth doing. We love you guys, our audience. Thank you for listening to us for the whole time and letting us share what we can share here. You can email on the show at vtwshowx@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter, twitter.com/showx, twitter.com/docdead, twitter.com/drkenreid for the show, for Mr. Wayne, for myself. You can check us out on Facebook, search for show space X, and you'll find us there as well. We're also on Reddit, reddit.com/r/showx. Every single show is posted there. If you have anything you want to discuss after the show, please use that as the comment place. That's the forum of sorts these days, so check us out there as well. We're also now on Instagram, where we do posts to advertise about interviews and such, especially. For example, today's show was advertised there for a few days beforehand, and you can find us there, instagram.com/VTWShowX. And patreon.com/showx as well. Be sure to subscribe there to keep our show afloat. That's the funds there mostly go towards keeping the show alive in terms of software and hardware and subscriptions that we need to keep everything running smoothly. But this month, of course, we're putting all of our funds towards charity instead. Thank you again to Todd for joining us. Octail, is there anything you want to give a shout out to? Any other sources online you want to refer to?
No. I've pretty much turned into the online hermit.
Okay.
So
that's no problem at all.
Maybe soon, but nothing at the moment.
No problem.
So, thank you.
Todd has also mentioned he'll be back in the future to join us in the near future with some more shows. So look forward to having Todd back on occasionally for the odd episode here.
Yeah, I'd really like to talk about silly things like Star Wars and Monster Train.
Yeah, we haven't smiled enough this show, sadly. I look forward to returning to that. But today was an important episode. Okay, thank you all for listening. And this has been Show X on twitch.tv, on YouTube, and on Facebook. Thank you very much. And thank you again, Wayne, for hosting.
All right, everybody. Have a good week. We'll catch you again next week, and we will get back on track with some of the things that we all have to smile about. So thank you very much for listening. Please feel free to share this show if you appreciated the conversation we had. Even after the fact, we'd love for others to be able to hear what we had to talk about. So thank you very much, and we'll catch you again later. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye. See you in the next some.